Zibby, and to analysts this morning. Would love to know what your thoughts are. We're looking at the stories on the headlines. The WhatsApp number to send your messages to is 0809 4440981. You can also tweet at smooth981, and the hashtag is freshlypressed981. Good morning, Mr. C, and good morning, Chibuzo. Welcome.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Chibuzo.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
All right.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Mr. C.
Okay, let's get straight into it. And we're kicking things off with Punch. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has finally extended the deadline for the swap of old notes at commercial banks by 10 days. And a press statement that was issued by the CBN Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the new deadline is February 10th. Nigerians will also have up until the 17th of February to deposit the old notes and in what has been described as a grace period.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So we're finally here. We knew all along that the chances of them sticking to January the 31st was slim to non-existent. So now it's been extended by 10 days. But here's the thing, right? The money's not in circulation. Over the weekend, it was difficult and close to near impossible to get physical currency notes. This morning, I tried a few ATMs and none were dispensing cash. Now, I got the whole idea, the whole logic behind moving to a cashless society. But whilst that is the ideal, this is our reality. We're not yet fully ready for it. So for people who need to buy their vegetables, their pepper, their onions, their cucumber and the likes, you need cash. You want to buy plantain, you need cash. There are certain things you need cash for that you cannot get over right now. Now, if there's no cash, the logical thing is do a transfer, right? But guess what? Your bank will mess you up. You'll be unable to do the transfer. Then, okay, you say switch to the next channel, which is use a debit card or a payment card. Then you get the feedback that transaction declined, financial institution not available, and all of that. Now, we understand what the president said in his recent interview, where he said that this policy was targeted at financiers of terrorism, money launderers, and corrupt people. However, whilst you're targeting these people, the ordinary people on the street still need cash. So, for example, this is fantastic. Your laborers on building sites, they're paid cash every day because they're daily workers. Now, if there are no physical notes to give them, a lot of them do not have the requisite documents to open bank accounts. What then happens? Some of them don't even have mobile phones, because if you have a mobile phone, then you can open bank accounts with certain financial institutions. And your account number is your phone number. So we need to rethink this policy. I think that even the February 10th deadline is still too short. And we should give a period of time for both sets of notes to coexist side by side before we then transit to the new set of notes exclusively. So even this February 10th deadline is looking very shaky. And then I read in the story that up to the 17th, Nigerians will be able to approach the CBN directly. How does that work? I cannot recall in recent history Nigerians approaching the central bank directly, because
some Nigerians have been able to via email when they've had issues with financial institutions.
So that's emails, but the statement is suggesting that you can take your old notes directly to the CBN. I'm not sure that's possible. And I'm looking at the practicality of it.
Or could the CBN be referring to these agents that have been appointed all across the country for people in perhaps rural areas?
Well, I don't know much about these agents that have been appointed. And let's piggyback back on what you just said. They've been appointed in the rural areas. How about the urban centers, the metropolis? So for Nigerians, say in VI, in Ikeja, in Apapa, in Yaba, after the 10th, how do they submit their old notes? Who do they submit them to? Because in Lagos, the CBN is only at Tinubu Square. I cannot begin to fathom or begin to think about a possibility or a scenario where 5,000 people throng that location because they're not equipped to deal with customers on an individual basis because that's not part of their mandate. So interesting times lie ahead, and let's see how the government and the central bank navigate their way around this.
All right, we've got some messages coming through. Gary Newton says, can you believe POS operators charge up to 500 naira to give 5,000 naira of the new currency? And Taya says, it's like we're struggling for new notes with POS attendants and those people queuing at event centers. Is it any different from buying petrol lately? Black market everywhere in Nigeria. It's like we enjoy a perverse process to doing things. It's frustrating. And Shegan says, in an ideal world, the process of new currency introduction would take about a year. Why some people are supporting the rushed and the rushed 3-month process is beyond me. Are we going to change currency every 4 years because of elections? Let's move on to our next headline. And this one is coming from Vanguard. The organized labor under the auspices of the Joint National Public Service Negotiating Council is pushing for the adoption of the International Labor Organizations Convention 190. Now, in addition, they are asking that the group is asking government to hold or uphold the collective bargaining agreements that were freely agreed into with unions in order to ensure industrial harmony in the workplace, and also stating or decrying the stress that retirees have to go through just to receive their benefits.
So obviously this is the basic. So this is on one hand, this is actually nice to hear from the labor unions. There's obviously the mandate for equality in the workplace is something that's very serious, especially in a lot of organizations. Fortunately, it can be seen from various angles. You're talking about things like equality in wages and equality in opportunities for both male and female. Yes, Nigeria is still old-fashioned like that within the organizations. Now, in some organizations, obviously, there are both written and unwritten rules that regard opportunities that are available for female staff, particularly. I think that's the female gender, particularly, who have been limited either in terms of their earning ability or in terms of their ability to rise in the organizations for various reasons. I think, what obviously is preferred is that people should get paid based on their skills, based on their negotiating ability, and not obviously based on gender, so that we expect that all the organizations take this place. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, I know that we do have laws that try to guarantee some of these things in the workplaces. But what tends to happen is that because of the nature of how our organizations are, especially a lot of them are in informal, we have a lot of organizations in the informal sector, and even organizations in the formal sector tend not to keep to these laws, especially where they are poor corporate governance and poor structures in the organizations. And because to a large extent, we are not a society that is used to using or utilizing the legal system. So for instance, basically most times when you get into organizations, whatever you're offered is based on trust. So unless you are pulling numbers and finding out from your colleagues, you really don't know if your pay disparity is due to the fact that you're being female or otherwise. Your assumption typically is that either that you didn't negotiate properly or whatever it is. I think various organizations are taking best practices to try and eliminate some of these things by having pay bands and various, so you could negotiate particular values within particular bands, either you're male or female, and you'd get that. But it's also about creating an inclusive workplace for females and for males and any other person who's working. So, that we need to even expand on it, because even when you look at the males and the females, that's the starting point. But if you look at the disabled and other things, disabled people or physically challenged, they also have the similar experiences in the workplace. So it's a good start that labor is also tending to look at other things apart from just engaging government and engaging organizations in wage issues or strikes. The other thing, they've obviously tried to sneak in their usual discussion, which is about the negotiations with the government and asking the government to enforce those negotiations. Unfortunately, what obviously has appears to have happened or appears to be happening at this instance is that this current government has kicked that problem down the line, and they put in a nice box for the next government to pick up on. So what I expect Labour actually to be doing at the moment actually to engage the presidential candidates about what their plans are with respect to these agreements that I have, and not waiting till these guys come on board and starting the next strike. Because unfortunately for me, and I stand to be corrected, so far Labour has been very silent on specifics with respect to this new government. Most of the candidates are already talking about issues and basically, gearing up and telling Labour. For instance, one of the candidates was talking about the subsidy issue and basically telling them that, hey, they are going to go on strike and there was nothing they were going to be able to do about it. They were going to remove the subsidies and, if you like, go and protest. And I feel at this point, Labour should be questioning these guys and asking them what their specific plans are. Each of them is potentially, or whichever of the candidates are potentially going to sit in that position. So Labour should have a mandate or should have some program or a plan or what do we want from the next president of Nigeria. All those things should be on the table at the moment, including the issue with pensioners. I have personal experiences with issues in pensioners when my dad was far off in the village. My grandfather, for instance, was far off in the village when he was alive. And my dad and his brother had to come from wherever they were to actually come to Lagos to try and get his pension benefits. And when you go there every time, you had our senior citizens, people who had served, had worked many years over, have been sitting down and they were completely dependent on their pensions, had to stand up, carry their mats, get transported down to Lagos, wherever the point or whatever part of the major city, sit down in the hot sun and in the rain because they wanted to collect what they had earned as workers after working for many years. Nobody should be treated like that. It is sad that our most vulnerable people we treat them with zero respect in this country. We can do better. So those are things I expect Labour to try and sort out. I expect Labour to be active about this, and I expect Labour to earn their dues, fighting some of those things and not just sitting down, getting fat and calling strikes. So it's fine to see that they're talking about it. I want to see them be more proactive about all these issues and try to engage and try and bring plans on the table. They cannot be reactive. They should not be reactive. That's why they get the dues that they are paid by their members. They need to do work.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Don't forget, you can keep the messages coming. 0809 444 0981. That's the WhatsApp number. We're also streaming live on YouTube, so you can catch the live stream and also post their comments on that live stream as well. It's Smooth981 on YouTube. Do stay with us. This is Freshly Pressed.
First Bank.
It's the breakfast crew on your radio.
Why you not working now? We dey wait for manager make it come pay us our money now because no pay. Excuse me. Mr. Adams. Why you dey hide now? Where these people their money?
I told them to allow me go to the
Why didn't you use the first money wallet bulk disbursement service to send their money to them?
I don't forget I use my first money wallet. I make una come closer. I make una bring out on our phone. Oh yeah, dial *894*1# to open your first money wallet account.
Oh yeah, make una give manager 3 Boza. Make una give first money wallet 5 Boza.
Enjoy unlimited bulk enrollment and bulk disbursement with First Money Wallet. Download the First Money Wallet app or dial *894*1# on any mobile phone to activate now. All money now on First Money. You first. First Bank. Smoother than a fresh jar of Zibby.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Zibby and our analyst, Mr. C and Chibuzo, joining us this morning. We're going on to the Premium Times. The WhatsApp number again, 0809 444 0981. Osun State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal has voided the election of Governor Ademola Adeleke and declared Boyega Oyetola as a winner of the election. Now, the tribunal has directed INEC to withdraw the certificate of return issued to Mr. Adeleke and his deputy, both of whom have already been sworn in.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. So the judgment in the petition filed by Mr. Oyetola was delivered over, I think, on Friday. And I've gotten a certified true copy of the judgment. I'm still going through it, but first reading, it doesn't make for happy vibes, and I'll explain. INEC bungled that election. And what do I mean? So the process for the electoral process goes like this. Every voter is accredited by the BVAS machine, and then you then go on to vote. Now the BVAS machine takes your fingerprints and takes your facial gestures, a facial scan. Now what happened in your Osun state election, as gleaned from the judgment, is that there were established cases of overvoting. And what does overvoting mean? Overvoting is a discrepancy between the total number of voters accredited and the total number of votes cast. And in 749 polling units, it was clearly established that there was overvoting for both the petitioner and the first respondent. We then go further. In preparing for the petition, they both applied for documents, certified true documents from INEC with regards to the elections. And INEC seemingly issued conflicting documents. Now, I haven't gotten to the part where the court or the tribunal resolved the discrepancy, but the reports I have read suggest or indicate that the tribunal did not exhaust every option open to it to resolving the discrepancy. Now, this is very ominous for the elections, which are 3 weeks away. Because if agents within INEC, rogue agents, first columnists within INEC, deliberately bungle this election, Nigerians may then be faced with the real possibility of an elected candidate who doesn't have the popular backing of the people. Because what this shows now is, if Zibby is popular in a particular location and I'm running against Zibby, all I have to do is ensure that I get more people there to vote. And then the entire election in that polling unit is cancelled. And if the results from that polling unit are not material enough to affect the larger results, then no rerun will be conducted. So politicians who have spent years, decades studying the system, this is a new option for them to gain it. Go to areas where your opponent is strong, ensure that the violations, the breaches of the Electoral Act, and the results there will be cancelled.
Breaches?
Yes. So all you have to do is ensure that there's overvoting upon the strongholds by hook or crook. So INEC needs to remember millions of Nigerians are waiting for this election. For the first time in a very long time, there are more Nigerians who are very hungry, very determined to come out and exercise the civic duty. So you cannot have a majority of Nigerians, a good number of Nigerians, coming out to vote, then INEC officials are monkeying around.
All right, let's see. We've got some.
I like to add a bit to that, Zibby.
Okay, go ahead, Chuzo.
Yeah. So obviously, this was one of the major possible issues that came up with the new approach. And like Mr. C has said, INEC needs to tighten up on that space, because basically what potentially would happen is that, like he said, parties would just sit down, party agents would sit down and basically say, hey, we don't need to spend our time and effort trying to beat this guy in that place. We're just going to flood it with all sorts of nonsense and make sure they cancel those places. It's basically a very ingenious way of disenfranchising voters who do not support your party and who do not support what you're trying to push forward. And it makes a mockery of the entire democratic process if it's allowed to happen. Because at the end of the day, what you would not have is the majority getting their way. because basically the minority who probably have the power to do so have found a way around the majority getting their way. So it's something that we need to be really, really keep a very keen eye on, as we move forward into the elections.
Okay, so very quickly, let me read out an excerpt from the judgment. Consequently, the second respondent did not score a majority of the lawful votes cast at the election. The declaration and return is hereby declared null and void. The second respondent cannot go lo and Bogawan in a judgment of an electoral tribunal in the 21st century. This is truly ridiculous.
Okay, let's go on to some messages. Izehi says, good morning. NLC, do we have such an organization? What action has the NLC taken about all the issues bedeviling the nation? As far as I'm concerned, the union is nothing but a group of people feeding fat on their members' dues for not doing much. And Anthony says, we're talking about deposits of money here, not BVN registration. The president and CBN have made it clear that some persons have been so reckless and intolerant to the economy, hoarding cash. They've explained how they don't want these same persons to induce voters that they stashed away with the money. We should be encouraging Nigerians to cooperate with the federal government and the CBN so we don't sell the soul of the nation into the hands of these corrupt persons and then come back to discuss vote buying after the elections. Desperate situations require desperate steps, and that is the Nigerian story. And okay, let's move on to this message. A lot of messages coming through. Babs says, feel ATM queues are all self-induced. Indeed, just like the FX market, we have created multi-tier markets for petroleum with the consequential arbitrage opportunities. Those enjoying the largesse will do all to ensure that it continues. And Yinka says, how are we sure the party that lost at the tribunal do same? I think the EA of 2022 is clear, and the voters were not just the wisest in a sense. Okay. And Oyewale says, and this has to do with artisans. I deal with artisans on project sites and I always transfer to their bank accounts. We're quick to also forget that the 100 naira notes have not been phased out. So you can withdraw cash to buy smaller items like pepper and plantain. More importantly, collection of old notes has never been an issue. It's the availability of new notes that is. But our reps are fighting for extension of old notes collection, which lends credence to the theory that they want to be able to use cash to induce voters during elections. And all right, that is Wale from Ikeja. Let's move on to the next headline. Don't forget the WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And of course, we're streaming the show live as well on YouTube at Smooth 981. And this one is coming from The Nation. 23.7 trillion naira debt restructuring. Minister Emefiele, National Assembly at daggers drawn. Now the debt stock is set to hit about 77 trillion naira with the addition of the 22.7 trillion loans from the CBN to the federal government. Now the country's debt profile hit 44.06 trillion in the third quarter of 2022, up from 39.56 at the end of 2021. And this data comes from the Debt Management Office.
Okay, so basically the crux of this story is that I think it's the Senate, let me be sure which it's basically okay, sorry. So basically what the National Assembly obviously is having issues with the central bank governor and the presidency obviously for adding to our debt profile, basically. The CBN has become the lender of choice for the federal government in recent times, and they've basically gone out to ask for an additional 22.7 trillion naira loan for the federal government. Now, obviously, I think this particular issue has been spoken about so many times. I wanted to say overflogged, but I don't think it's ever going to be overflogged. But I've spoken about so many times about how this particular government has chosen to increase Nigeria's debt profile over a short period of time. I think we've all come to the same agreement. Yes, there's a deficit with infrastructure. Yes, there's a deficit with a lot of things that are needed. So as we are not able to generate enough money to be able to cover our needs, we obviously need to do some borrowing. The challenge for us, a lot of people obviously, that a lot of the spending is going on recurrent spending, largely on salaries, what appears to be our federal workforce. And a lot of the other part of it is going on projects that do not appear to be able to pay for themselves short term. So while the federal government needs to keep on engaging on this, and the hope of the Nigerian on the street is that this money is going into something that would benefit them down on the line. What we're basically looking at is the point where the country's debt profile keeps increasing. So once we add this to it, with the central bank alone, the federal government will be owing about 7 trillion. And that obviously is a bit of a challenge for a country that has seen its ability to generate funds drop in the last few years, because obviously we are not meeting up to our oil production quotas today. And we are spending a lot more. It's also unfortunate, I'm going to try a lot of my discussions today on coming elections, that if you look at what some of the candidates are speaking to, especially some of the major candidates, this will not stop, because what seems to be happening what seems to be very key for most Nigerian politicians is a lot of spending on infrastructure. Because and the logic is very simple for the typical politician, is that once I can spend on something I can build and I can grow, people can point to it and say it's my success. The other thing also that, in truth, and we've seen this in some instances, the more you build, the more you can take away, because it means that you can send out contracts, you can build up your contract number. So we need to be very careful that we're not creating debt that we're not end up paying for, especially now that it seems that the government obviously seems to prefer to borrow internally to the CBN, who seems to just be printing money to meet up the federal government's needs. It's also going to have we also need to be very careful about the impact on inflation and in the country. So it's something that needs to be kept a clear eye on. Unfortunately, what the comments by the NAS in this instance is that they're basically just going to sign off on this, despite the fact that they've raised that they want to ask additional questions and they are not able to get the CBN governor to come and answer their questions. I want the CBN governor and the finance minister in this instance to come and answer their questions. But it also speaks to what we've seen a lot from this current NAS, as they basically rubber stamp most of the federal government's requests and queries, most of the federal government's requests. And for me, it also questions the responsibility and the role of the NAS going forward. Yes, we understand that there's the majority government in power. And even with the minority parties, what we need and we want from our representatives is that they should be able to hold the government accountable when it also affects the entire country early enough and in a smart way, not just when it seems to be affecting them, where decisions seem to be affecting them, then everybody's in a hurry to call out the federal government, send out requests to imprison the governors and all that. We need them to be on the spot doing their job. And it also means that Nigeria should also place some attention on the election of the National Assembly members in the next election. It's not just about the presidency. It's about every aspect, everybody where we're going to elect in the next elections. We need to place some focus on it and take it seriously. That's where we need to go to solve all these problems, at least try and solve part of these problems going forward.
All right, I'll take a few messages. And Deborah says everyone can open an account now. All you need is a tier one. A tier one account can be opened with just a passport photo. Mo from Ikeja says, let's go straight to the point. There is a lack of planning in the entire system, and it's worse. This is not the first time we are changing currency in Nigeria. Our best strategy is to throw deadlines around till something sticks. And he also says, poor. And Ibukun says, my question is, how did INEC allow people to overvote when the beavers should have thrown them out? And Big E says, there's too much happening in the country. What can the NLC do? Is it for the petrol hike prices or the high cost of goods? It's about voting in the right government. And that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Mr. C. And thank you, Chibuzo, for joining us as well. Thank you for listening and thank you for your messages. Please stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
You first. First bank.
Thanks, Zibby. Bye.